Okay friends, it's time to get started on our job. One of the first things we have to do is safely raise and support the front of the vehicle so the wheel's off the ground. After that, if you have hubcaps, go ahead and remove those. Next, we're going to remove all 4 of our 21mm lug nuts and then the wheel. Alright, now that we have the wheel off of there, the next thing that we want to pay attention to is the jam nut. The jam nut is what's located in between your outer tie rod end and your inner tie rod end. This is a 19mm, but I'm just going to use some nice long pliers because it's easier for me. Now let's move along to removing our outer tie rod end nut right here. To do that, I'm going to use a 14mm socket with an extension. Now I'm just going to put the nut back on there a couple threads. A little bit of penetrant. The next thing we're going to do is start separating the outer tie rod end from the knuckle. I have the nut on here as a safety nut. I'm going to continue on with my hammer. I'm going to give the knuckle a couple loving bonks to try to break this free. Now we can start removing our outer tie rod end from the inner tie rod end. To do that, I'm going to turn this counterclockwise, and each turn I'm going to make sure I count it and write that down. 2, 3, and so on. The next thing that we need to do is remove this jam nut from the inner tie rod end. To do that, I'm going to go ahead and hold the inner tie rod end with some locking pliers, and then I'll use my 19mm socket to remove the nut. Now let's apply some copper never seize to the threaded area, put on our jam nut. Now we can get ready to install our outer tie rod end. Let's go ahead and start this on. Once it's started, count the amount of turns that it takes to put it on so it matches up with the same amount of turns as it took to remove it. Now we can take that outer tie rod end, we'll line it up with the hole in the knuckle, slide it up in there. We can put on that outer tie rod end nut. We'll bottom this out. Now we can snug this up. And then torque this to 25 foot-pounds. Let's bottom out this jam nut with the outer tie rod end. Once it's bottomed out, just go ahead and make sure it's nice and snug. Now the next thing that we're going to want to do is pay attention to the outer tie rod end in comparison to the knuckle itself. You want to make sure that they're pretty much as level as possible. If they're not, just go ahead and grab some pliers, grab onto that outer tie rod end, give it a little twist until it's as close as possible. Okay, so now at this point we can go ahead and put our wheel back up on here. Let's start on all of our lug nuts. We'll bottom these out, get the wheel back on the ground, and then we're going to torque the lug nuts to 85 foot-pounds. Now that we have the wheel safely on the ground, let's go ahead and torque these in a crisscross manner. After you have all your lug nuts safely torqued, let's go ahead and put on our hubcap. Now for this, you're going to have a valve cover hole. You want to make sure that you line this up with the stem. Give it a couple loving bonks. Make sure it's completely secured so it doesn't fall off while you're driving down the road. Okay friends, we got the front end back together. What's left to do now? Now you're going to want to make sure that you take your car safely for a road test down to your local alignment shop. Thanks.